Mira boarded the late-night train with legs that trembled from exhaustion. The dim carriage lights flickered as she moved down the aisle, weaving past passengers already dozing or absorbed in their phones. She found an empty seat beside a sharply dressed man whose presence instantly made the space feel warmer. Her chest tightened with embarrassment. Her faded jeans, worn sneakers, and bag patched with mismatched stitches contrasted sharply with his crisp black coat and quiet confidence. She muttered a polite apology before sitting, clutching her canvas bag like a shield. The train lurched forward. Mira let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She told herself to stay awake. She needed to get home, needed to check on her younger sister, needed to plan how she'd survive the next day with barely any sleep. But her eyelids felt heavier with each passing minute. The cool night seeped through her thin jacket, and she shivered, huddling closer to the window. The man beside her shifted slightly, as if noticing. Without saying a word, he angled his shoulder subtly toward her, an unconscious gesture, maybe, but it created a pocket of warmth she hadn't felt in weeks. Her head dipped once. She jerked upright. No, she couldn't fall asleep on public transport, again. Last time she'd missed her stop and spent an hour walking home alone at midnight. She blinked rapidly, focusing on the blurred lights racing past the window. But the soft sway of the train, the quiet hum vibrating through the seats, and the stranger's calm presence formed a cocoon around her. Finally, her strength gave out. Her head tilted sideways, landing gently on his shoulder. She froze. Her eyes shot open, mortified. She started to pull away, but the man didn't tense or flinch. Instead, he remained perfectly still, his posture steady and relaxed, as though her presence didn't inconvenience him in the slightest. His scent, clean, earthy, faintly reminiscent of cedarwood and the outdoors, wrapped around her senses, easing the frantic beat of her heart. "You're tired," he murmured, barely louder than the train's rumble. Not judgmental, not annoyed, just a simple observation. The kindness in those two words unraveled her last thread of resistance. Her breathing slowed, her head stayed where it was. And before she understood what was happening, the world slipped into darkness, and she surrendered to the most peaceful sleep she'd had in months. Mira woke slowly, drifting upward through layers of warmth and confusion, the way someone rises from a dream they don't want to leave. But the moment her senses sharpened, panic jolted her fully awake. The steady rumble of the train was gone. The hard plastic seat beneath her had vanished. Instead, she lay on something impossibly soft, supple leather that creaked slightly as she sat up too fast. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't inside a train at all. She was in a living room. No, a ranch lounge, warm, spacious, and glowing with early morning sunlight that streamed through enormous windows. Outside, fields stretched endlessly, painted gold by dawn. A breeze slipped through a slightly open door, carrying the distant sounds of animals, neighing, low mooing, rustling grass. The air smelled fresh, like pine, hay, and something subtly sweet she couldn't place. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Mira scrambled to her feet, her worn shoes thudding onto a polished wooden floor. Everything around her looked expensive. Hand-woven rugs, leather furniture, shelves filled with books and framed photos of wide-open landscapes. She spun around in disbelief. Her bag was neatly set beside the couch, her jacket folded on top of it. Nothing was missing. Nothing was touched. But the wrongness of being here, of waking in a stranger's home, constricted her chest until she could barely breathe. What happened? She whispered to herself, clutching her bag straps as though they might anchor her. She scanned the room for exits. 2 hallways, a front door, a staircase leading up, but her legs wouldn't move. Her mind raced. Had the train crashed? Had she been kidnapped? No. Everything looked too careful, too respectful. Someone had placed her belongings within reach and covered her with a soft wool blanket now folded neatly on the arm of the couch. Her throat tightened. She couldn't remember anything after falling asleep on the train. Shame washed over her. Had she drooled? Had she snored? Had she embarrassed herself in front of the man beside her? Footsteps approached, steady and unhurried. Myra's breath stilled. She turned toward the sound, bracing herself for anything, her pulse pounding hard enough to echo in her fingertips. Her hands trembled lightly as she tightened her grip on her bag. The doorway filled with a tall silhouette, the morning sun outlining broad shoulders and a relaxed, almost familiar posture. For a moment, she could only stare, frozen between fear and disbelief, waiting to see who had brought her here, and why. The man from the train stepped fully into the room, and the tension in Myra's body shifted from fear to stunned recognition. He looked different in the morning light, still sharp and composed, but somehow softer without the city shadows clinging to him. His coat was gone, replaced by a fitted charcoal sweater and rolled-up sleeves that revealed strong forearms dusted with sunlight. He held a steaming mug between his hands, the rising wisps of heat curling in the air. "You're awake," he said gently, as if relieved. "I wasn't sure how long you'd sleep. You were completely out." Myra couldn't form words. Her throat felt too tight, her mind too cluttered by disbelief. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally managed a shaky, "Where am I?" "A Hale family ranch," he answered calmly, offering her the mug. It was the closest place to the station when the train reached the last stop. She stared at the drink but didn't move to take it. Her hands were still wrapped around her bag like a lifeline. He seemed to understand her hesitation and set the mug gently on the table beside her, maintaining a respectful distance. "You fainted," he continued quietly. "I tried to wake you several times before the train emptied out, but you didn't respond. I didn't want to leave you alone on a platform in the middle of the night." His voice held no defensiveness, no arrogance, just simple sincerity. Myra's cheeks burned with embarrassment. Memories rushed back in fragments. The soft warmth of his shoulder, the exhaustion clawing at her bones, the way she'd given into sleep without meaning to. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, mortified. "I didn't mean to fall asleep on you. I didn't mean to cause trouble." He shook his head lightly. It wasn't trouble. Those 3 words, spoken with quiet conviction, made her breath hitch. She finally lifted her gaze to his. His eyes were not cold or distant as she expected from someone dressed in luxury the night before. They were warm, concerned, almost gentle. She felt strangely seen, as though he wasn't looking at the patchy jacket or the scuffed shoes, but at her exhaustion, her fear, her effort to stay composed. "I brought you here so you could rest safely. That's all," he added. "Once you're ready, I can drive you back to town." The kindness disarmed her more than anything else had. People didn't do this. Not for strangers, and certainly not for girls like her. Something inside her tightened. Something she couldn't name, as she stood there, shaken and uncertain, while he stepped back to give her space. The ranch was quiet around them, bathed in gentle morning light, and for the first time since waking, Myra felt her panic slowly loosening its grip. Not because the situation made sense, because he did. He finally told her his name, Adrian Hale, and the moment it left his lips, Myra felt the world tilt again, but for a different reason entirely. She knew that name. Everyone did. Hale Industries was the kind of empire people whispered about. Skyscrapers, tech divisions, real estate, philanthropy galas she only saw when wiping down lobby televisions during night cleaning shifts. She stared at him, stunned, unsure if she should apologize again, bow, run, or pretend she somehow hadn't recognized him. But Adrian said it with such effortless humility that it took the intimidation out of the revelation. As though he wasn't one of the most powerful men in the city, just someone offering morning tea in a quiet ranch house. "I didn't want to overwhelm you earlier," he explained, leaning lightly against the doorframe, "so I didn't mention who I was on the train. Most people react." Myra swallowed hard. I'm sorry if I reacted weirdly." He actually smiled a little, and the expression softened the sharp lines of his face. "You fainted on my shoulder. That's not the worst first impression I've ever gotten." Her face flushed so hot she was sure she might combust. She dropped her stare to the floor, twisting the strap of her bag in her fingers. "I really didn't mean for any of this to happen. I must have been more tired than I thought." "You were exhausted," he said gently. "You kept trying to stay awake, even after your body gave up." He paused as if debating whether to say more. Most people push themselves past breaking before they admit they need rest. The words were simple, but they hit deeper than she expected. She felt suddenly exposed, not because he knew anything personal about her, but because he'd noticed the one thing she always tried to hide, how hard she was struggling to survive without letting anyone see. She sat down slowly on the edge of the couch as he handed her the mug again. This time, she took it. Her fingers brushed his lightly, and warmth bloomed against her skin, sharper than the steam curling from the cup. She inhaled the scent, something herbal and calming, and let it ground her. "You don't have to be afraid," he said, taking a step back to give her space again. "You're safe here, I promise." Safe. It had been a long time since she'd heard that word and believed it. Outside, sunlight spread across the ranch like a soft invitation, horses grazing near a fenced pasture, shadows stretching across the rolling hills, the crisp morning air shimmering above the grass. It felt almost unreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. Adrian followed her gaze, then asked quietly, "When you've rested, I can take you wherever you need to go. But if you want breakfast first, the kitchen's this way." Her stomach growled loudly, betraying her before she could answer. She froze, mortified, but Adrian only gave a warm, amused exhale, not mocking her at all. For the first time that morning, a tiny, reluctant smile tugged at Myra's lips. Maybe fate had dragged her off the train. Maybe exhaustion had thrown her into the arms of the last person she ever expected to meet. But somehow, in this unfamiliar ranch bathed in gentle light and impossible kindness, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope.